Hello, and welcome to the AzureWell podcast, where we talk about how to restore your health naturally. I'm Susan Booth, and the subject in today's episode is what to do if you are on pharmaceutical drugs and want to get off. So if you're on acid blockers or statins, you are going to feel empowered after hearing this. Our guest today is Dr. Christie Fleetwood. Dr. Fleetwood is the president of the Naturopathic Medical Institute, the VNMI. So welcome, Christie.
Thank
Dr.
you.
Fleetwood.
Thank you. You can call me Christie. Christie has been my name all my life, so it works really well for me. The only time I want to throw the doctor title around is when I need to for my clients and patients. So we're just two gals talking about health.
Okay.
Well, I love restoration of health, and that has to happen before deprescribing. So nothing like just diving right into the topic, right? Because a lot of people will come to a naturopathic doctor with the assumption that, hey, doc, take me off these petrochemical pharmaceuticals and load me up with the supplements to manage my GERD, gastroesophageal reflux disorder, or manage my cholesterol that's way out of whack. When you change your lifestyle toward health, then over medication becomes radically obvious. And then it's really the safest route to deprescribe. Mm-hmm. So if you're serious about getting off the drugs, anybody listening, you got to be willing to change your life. Are you ready for a full lifestyle overhaul? That's the better question. Not how do I get off these drugs, doc? But my question to the person is, are you ready to live like abundantly, vibrantly, vitally in health rather than disease?
Well, this question came up because I was talking with a coworker who is on the proton pump inhibitors.
Yep, you got it.
And she was, expressing that she's having other symptoms that I recognized as probably symptoms of low stomach acid, because the body needs to have that stomach acid. And
Absolutely.
So in order to solve all these other problems and become in that abundant health, it would be good if she had the appropriate amount of stomach acid. But if she tries to have more stomach acid, it hurts.
Sure.
And so what do you do? Because you want to get better, and part of getting better is to have more stomach acid, and yet you don't have any, and when you do, it seems like a catch-22.
It is, because the lifestyle has never been addressed. One of the things that really irritates me is the lack of informed consent when you go to a medical doctor and they see you for 7 to 15 minutes and write your prescription. Mm-hmm. And they say, take this drug, it'll make your symptoms go away. Mm-hmm. But at what risk? Mm-hmm. Who is getting informed consent that their proton pump inhibitor, while blocking stomach acid, is also not allowing your body to kill off the amoebic dysentery that's coming in with your food? Mm-hmm. It's not allowing your own body to produce what it needs in order to completely break down the food. It's not allowing your body to close off that lower esophageal sphincter, but you've still got food dropping into a warm, moist, churning environment, which is going to cause fermentation. And whenever anything ferments, there are bubbles, and bubbles rise, and that lower esophageal sphincter is not shut down because there's insufficient acid. And so that milieu in the gut is still acidic when compared to the rest of the esophagus. Mm-hmm. And those bubbles are coming up, and I got to go take my proton pump inhibitor again. I got to go take my H2 blocker again. Clearly, I still have too much acid. And the reality is there's not enough. Mm-hmm. Another reality is that these drugs are only to be used in the very short term. They've only been studied for 8 to 12 weeks. Weeks. Mm-hmm. That's 2 months 3 months tops. And then you're not supposed to be on these because the H2 blockers drop the acid sufficiently enough for you to get sick by your food, cause worsening of the situation. And there's this long list of nutrients that are wasted. Proton pump inhibitors go one step further, wasting all those same nutrients. And you can't break down meat. You can't break down protein. You can't rebuild anything in your system. So over the years and decades, Susan, decades that people are put on these medications, they have steadily decreasing health. They become sicker and sicker, and there are more problems, and they're breaking bones, and they don't understand, and they get put on other drugs to strengthen the bones and other drugs, because every time we waste nutrients, that long list for either category of acid blocking, all of those nutrients have associated adverse events if we don't have sufficient nutrition.
That's right.
We gotta restore the health first, teaching the person to eat the food that's going to be the best fuel, and then cooking it almost to death, which I don't normally tell people. But when you've got a wrecked gut and you have insufficient acid, you cannot break the food down. You cannot absorb the fantastic nutrition that should be there. So I will have them cook their food, eat lots of soups. Everything needs to be room temperature, or rather body temperature, or warmer, so that, and mechanically broken down, so that you don't have to rely on your impaired gut to do that breaking down work. And then there's some trade secrets, you see, like switching the person who's on the proton pump inhibitor, which binds irreversibly. Once you take that pill, you cannot make hydrogen ions. You can't.
Irreversibly?
It is irreversible. You have to wait until it times out, and it takes about 26 hours for the drug to fall off. So, and how often do they take their proton pump inhibitors? Every day, every 24 hours. And if they're late and there's some acid production, they go, because they've trained their guts to be at a much higher pH, an almost neutral pH. That's terrifying for a human. And now we've got all kinds of gut issues that nobody talked about before. We've got small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, large intestine bacterial overgrowth, which is that good bacteria when it's kept in its proper contents, proper space. But in the absence of reasonable nutrition, it's our own bacteria overgrowing and creating problems. Which, by the way, is the problem with most things that we get, most things that we catch. We don't catch anything from the outside, or very rarely. Typically, it's how we're living that causes an overgrowth of our own bacteria. So here's something that's kind of disturbing and very wild, and it's cool and disturbing. And that is, if we were to divvy up all of my cells and put on a balance beam all of Christie's cells that contain DNA that belongs to Christie, and then all the cells that are part of Christie that do not contain Christie's DNA, the overwhelming majority would go to the not Christie's DNA. Kind of makes you wonder who's the real parasite.
Oh boy.
And listeners, please do not take yourself off your medication. Please. I mean, that's how most of my clients are. They've already taken themselves off, then they've ended up in a hospital setting, been put back on the same drugs, and then they limp into my office going, I need to pay you to teach me how to come off of these drugs. And I'm like, no, you're paying me to teach you how to live in a healthful direction, not a disease promoting direction. It's not about your genes. It's about what your parents learned from their parents and what they learned from their parents. And all that keeps getting handed down and what you're going to do with your kids. We need to correct that. Because we've got control over about 70% of how our genes express themselves, turning on for disease or off. And by the way, I learned this recently, so I have to share. Genes cannot code for disease. They can't. It's just a piece of protein. It doesn't know what disease is or not, but it does know when that gene, that piece of protein, is sitting in a system with insufficient nutrition. And so it will adapt itself when there is insufficient nutrition. And that's where disease comes from.
This nutrition is needed, and you're not getting it when you're on a proton pump inhibitor. It changes the pH in your gut. Once you get off of that, if the acid rises, the bubbles come up, the sphincter doesn't hold it down. Whatever acid you do have comes up to where it doesn't belong, because as long as it stays down in the stomach, it's not going to hurt.
Right.
And yet my coworker, she has a family to feed, so she needs to cook for everyone. And what you just suggested is, oh, well, you need to go make yourself some soup puree of, something that is cooked and soft and easy to digest. Is that practical? Is that what you suggest for what do they need to put into it? How hard do they need to do this?
So one of the first questions that I ask somebody who wants to work with me is, what are your top 4 priorities in life in this season? Top 4 for right now. And if I hear everything else except for that person, I'll ask, where are you? Because you're listing work and family and activities. If you can't put yourself in your own top 4 priorities, you're not going to reverse a problematic lifestyle. Now, this scenario that you've just painted with the person who needs to concentrate on proper nutrition for herself is also in charge of the rest of the family. Wouldn't you like the rest of your family to be eating good quality food? Is that not important to you? Oh, well, most of the time it's, well, of course that's important to me. Okay, well, that part of the equation is now already wrapped into the treatment plan, because now you're going to be feeding the entire family better quality food. And you can cook whatever you want that's going to work really well for the family. And there are some fascinating tests that I can do to help really narrow down the proper fuel for an individual. Because I have not met a person yet who was not intolerant to something that most people would consider good and healthy. For me, that's cow dairy. I cannot break down cow dairy. It blows a fuse in me someplace and hurts me 3 different ways over about 4 different days. Enough said about that. So I can test people to determine what is the preferred fuel for that individual, which makes the dinner table somewhat more complicated. But of the 4 different blood types in the world today, 3 of those are represented at my table. We've got one cook, one person who does the shopping, makes the same meal for everybody. It's going to be proportioned on the plates differently. And our intolerances are also adjusted for in that meal. So that means that some things have just gone away from the house. And really, that's the list of all the snacky things that we used to eat back in the days when I was a pharmacist and not living abundantly well. Health was not really part of my vocabulary back then. I mean, I thought I was living healthily, And from a conventional perspective, I probably was, in that I was exercising, but I ate a lot of junk food and a lot of fast food and drank a lot of sodas and ate a lot of candy bars. And that stuff has just gone by the wayside. But back to this person who needs to do something good for the whole family and then something a step further for herself or himself. Get that good stuff and put your portion into a separate pan, because you're going to cook that a little bit more. Or you're going to toss it into the blender. You're going to break down the cell walls of those fantastic overly cooked vegetables so that your digestive tract, which is impaired, it's limping, it can just look at the food and go, hey, let yourself in. Come on. Instead of, I got to break down something raw. Yes, the raw carrot will have more constituents in it that are better for you to get. But if you cannot break it down, it does you very little good. So we're going to break those cell walls to release the nutrition into the broth of the soup, and then you drink the broth. So it can certainly be done. And the fabulous piece is it does not take that long to heal the gut. So if I can get my gut compromised people to commit for 3 months, 3 months, just 3 months, doesn't mean that you're going to be completely off the medication, but you probably will be. Now, if you've been on it for 20 years, that's going to be a slower taper than the person who's been on it for the 8 weeks in which the drug was studied. But it's sufficient time in just 3 months to really start to boost the new cells that are coming up underneath the old ones that are like kicked back and not doing, they can't. They've been told to just, everybody's on strike. But the clinical pearl is those people taking the proton pump inhibitors that bind irreversibly, non-competitively. Once we've got them eating the right fuel for their magnificent, better than machines bodies, then I'll switch them to a H2 blocker, because H2 blockers are competitively binding. They can be displaced when the body itself goes, hey, have you noticed? We've got some nutrition. When did that happen? I don't know, but it feels kind of good, right? I think we're supposed to be functioning. I think we've got what we need to function. Hey, it's way too basic in this environment for us. Let's crank down the pH. And so there's some acid that the body can make and displace the H2 blocker. And so there's this little bit by little bit release, which is not sufficient for most people to even notice. And so I like to do things that are going to be very kind and gentle, but a way to actually get them off the medication altogether, because they have shown that they're already going down the path of vibrant wellness, health. Whenever you make lifestyle adjustments, then you're going to see over medication. So it's got to be the person's choice, decision to start living for health instead of living with dis-ease.
And I like that it makes it so that for each person, it's individualized. You are looking at what you need right now, and that, yes, you can back down off of this super powerful drug to a less powerful drug that gives your body the opportunity to start working on its own. And then you kind of back down from there. Would you be at any point during that using supplements like enzymes or anything like that to help digest the food, or do you kind of just let the body do its thing for a while?
So different doctors have different ways of doing things. I don't typically use enzymes, but I will if the person is not fruit intolerant, because there are those who really, fruit is not going to be a preferred fuel for them. That one's the hardest of all the intolerances, in my opinion. But I will very often use lemon water or apple cider vinegar diluted in water, just small amounts, so that we've got a total, it's like a tablespoonful of water, maybe to a teaspoonful, not quite, of freshly squeezed lemon juice or apple cider vinegar that's got the mother in it. And they sip on that. It's not a kick it back. For the 15 minutes prior to sitting down to a meal, you sip on that because it's got a low pH. But it's not the kind of pH that's going to be detrimental to the bloodstream. It's actually going to be alkalinizing the body as a whole. But think in terms of, see this happening to me already. When I'm thinking about slicing a lemon, I smell that. We're so radically well designed. You smell those essential oils, and right then you start to salivate, which that salivation starts the process of enzymes being put into the stomach from the pancreas. The duodenum's getting ready here on the other side, the gallbladder, everything's like, food's coming. We smelled it. Food's coming. And so you put just a couple of drops. You just want the taste of that lemon water or apple cider vinegar water on the tongue. And you're going to do that. I instruct my clients to do that every couple minutes. Now, again, we're talking roughly 20 milliliters. This is less than an ounce of liquid. It's 2/3 of an ounce of liquid. It's not much. So it's merely a taste to keep all of that digestive fire stoking. Woo! Woo! So that by the time they're sitting down to eat, so here's a lifestyle adjustment, sit down. When it's dinner time, breakfast time, lunchtime, meal time, that is time to eat. Have a conversation, but the conversation needs to be reasonable for the dinner table. It's not the time to get all uppity with what's going on in the world, what's going on in politics, and who's fighting whom, because that stops digestion. We need to be in parasympathetic nervous system dominance, breathing, eating, being grateful, thankful, enjoying the meal. So,
yeah, I found out when I had a colostomy bag myself, I found out very real that when you are under stress, your system shuts down.
Yes.
Nothing goes through. It waits until it's not under stress, and then it will let things through. So, it's very true that way. And the other thing that you mentioned that I thought was pretty important is this thing of food is your best medicine.
Yes.
And what you were talking about is this little amount of lemon juice or apple cider vinegar. I think that it's common for people to say, well, food is my best medicine. I need natural vitamin C that comes from orange juice. I'm going to just chug this whole glass of orange juice because I need the vitamin C, and that food is my best medicine. Chug it down. And what you're describing is the effect of just the taste of that on your tongue to begin with, signaling the rest of your body to produce what it needs to naturally. You're sending it a message more than just chugging it down like, oh, the food is my best medicine, I'll just shovel it in.
Yeah, we as Americans have a tendency, and again, this has kind of been programmed into us, that if a little bit is good, then a lot of it's got to be better. And that's not true. This really got me up in arms, but I think I can say it now in a very calm way. There was a study done in the 1980s where a scientist was studying something. I don't even know what it was, but he decided to dilute it and dilute it some more until he could see no more physiological effect. And sure enough, as he began, here's an effect. And then that effect was going down and down and down and down, which is what he was anticipating, a linear line downward. But then something really strange happened. After he got it below Avogadro's number, which means there's precious little chance that there is anything of material value. Ooh, put a pin in that. No material value left. It's been going down. No material value there anymore. And lo and behold, the points started coming up. There is nothing left. And now we're getting a more profound physiological effect? What? So we sent that off to a different scientist saying, dude, came up with something weird in the lab. Could you repeat this and tell me what you find? And his buddy found the same thing. So they found researchers that they didn't really know well on a different part of the planet saying, hey, you're a researcher. You're researching kind of like we are. This is what we found. Does it make sense? Could you take a look? They did that half a dozen times. All the scientists had the same waveform, unexpected. Oh my, this flies in the face of our Newtonian explanation for things. They tried to publish it in Nature, not JAMA, because it was too wild, but just Nature. Nature rejected it, saying it doesn't work that way. They said, we know. This is why we want you to publish it so we can figure out what we're looking at, because this is not our usual way of doing things. They said, okay, we will, but we want you to do it again under investigation and observation. So we're going to pick our investigative team to watch you do this, which they did, and they included a magician. I know, a magician. His name was Randy the magician. They did the experiment again. Same thing happened, crazy waveform, unexpected. Nature published, and their conclusion was, we cannot explain the sleight of hand. In other words, this is something that our current dogma, our current understanding, our current way of seeing the world, it doesn't match with that. And when that happens, you have a couple of options. You can pluck out that idea and go, well, this can't be true because I just saw something that can't be explained by this. I got to now find a different belief system that will include this weirdness that keeps happening. But that's a significant mind shift. And some people are unwilling to go there. Sort of like when Galileo said, hey, y'all, I don't think the world is actually flat. Been taking some measurements, and it looks like we must be on a ball. And you know what else is really crazy about that? I don't think that we have the sun going around us. I think we're doing this going around the sun thing. And I can just imagine Galileo being kind of mind blown, going, you guys, isn't this just the coolest? And he gets brought before the leaders. We're going to cut off your head if you don't retract all of these blasphemous things that you've just said. What? But there comes a time, and I think many people are shifting just in the last 4 years, 5 years, when our everything got flipped upside down in 2020. And a lot of people are starting to question the medical paradigm, this better living through chemistry thing that we've been trying for a good 60 years now. What do our health statistics look like with big agriculture and big pharma and big lobbyists?
Just being able to start the conversation, talk about it in a public way so that everyone can hear the different sides of the story.
Yeah.
and know that everyone is working together to try to find the truth, the answer, rather than if there is a truth out there, let's squash it because that doesn't help our money-making machine over here, those kind of things. Totally agree with you. So the other thing I wanted to touch on is on statins. Lots of people on statins. They're put on there for a cholesterol number, I understand. The cholesterol number, I gather, has changed sometimes. They've decided how much, medications they want to put out there.
Correct.
And yet, you're told that if you go off of this, which you're supposed to be on it for the rest of your life, because
Yeah.
if you go off of it probably within 2 weeks, all of that bad cholesterol will come back and it will cause you to have a heart attack or a stroke just like that. And so I think everyone that's on a statin lives in fear that if they go off of it, they're going to just suddenly fill up with all this stuff and then die
Right.
of a heart attack or a stroke. And yet the body is supposed to be able to regulate its own cholesterol. Maybe there's a reason why its cholesterol is up.
Bingo.
And when we fix that, when we try to fix it artificially, it's actually telling the body, well, you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah.
So what does a person do? They're afraid to go off of it, and yet they realize that they probably should. And it does, the statins do have some really bad side effects long term. What do you say?
I love the way that you framed that because again, it's what you believe. Belief drives behavior. And so those who believe that there's a ton of germs out there, rather than, there's an environmental impact of something in your own bacteria or the way that you're living makes your own bacteria overgrow. When we get out of sorts, it's our bacteria cleaning up our own messes. But you said, well, doesn't the body know what it's doing? That's a crazy concept, Susan, that our bodies are wise, that we're built with a ton of information and wisdom. Cholesterol is a good guy. So we've been told for decades, and that started with the first manufacturer of a statin drug. It was Mevacor by Merck Sharp&Dohme. And the scientist that created that, which was simvastatin or lovastatin, I don't remember, doesn't really matter. But the scientist combined this new chemical with an existing nutrient called coenzyme Q10. And the bosses said, why? Why did you do that? And the scientist said, well, because the drug itself has some side effects associated with it, like every drug on the market. Okay, that was not maybe what he said. That's what I added. But this drug has a side effect. And when we put the coenzyme Q10 with it, then that will mitigate the bulk of the side effects. Smart. And Merck said, take it out. Take it out. Because when you put the nutrient there with it, you're alerting the public to the fact that that drug is problematic. And it's expensive. Take it out. That scientist left. But Merck is the one who went to the big consensus of cardiologists to say, you know what? Cholesterol levels should be no higher than 240. And our drug can bring those numbers down. So if somebody's had a heart attack or a stroke, cholesterol is the bad guy. We shouldn't be eating eggs or butter. So this drug will make that number come down. And they said, okay. And then after a few statins had come on the market, again, not science, folks, not science, but a consensus of people. And many of those people making the decisions are being financed by the pharmaceutical company. This is how this game gets played. And it's ugly. Let's drop that number from 240 to 220. And now it's been dropped down to 200 by consensus because clearly cholesterol is bad and we got to just keep dropping it and dropping it and dropping it. And because people are still having heart attacks and strokes, even while on the statin. How is that possible? Well, because it's the wrong paradigm. So if you believe that cholesterol is bad, then you're going to go for drug management. But putting someone on a drug does not stop the disease process. You're just artificially lowering a number. You're still at just the same risk of a heart attack or stroke because you're continuing to live in a way that causes the body to be inflamed. Oh, wait. What does systemic inflammation have to do with cholesterol? Well, I'm glad you asked. Because when the body is wrestling with systemic inflammation, in its wisdom, it makes more cholesterol so that it can be an internal band-aid for those vessels that are about to blow, about to rupture. Too much of a good thing can be bad, however. And so when there's too much cholesterol in the inside of that tube where the blood is flowing, then it can occlude the tube altogether. This is not cholesterol's fault. This is the body in its wisdom trying to get a symptom out there that'll get its person's attention. Hey, you got to live differently. So this is why lowering the number does not help because the disease process is still going on. Some of the statins have a little bit of anti-inflammatory action. That's probably its best benefit to the body. And when people learn to live differently and choose to do the different lifestyle that reduces systemic inflammation, which means taking out the junk that's not preferred fuel, it seems to always start there. Taking out the thoughts that make them feel constrained or trapped. It may be they need a change in their occupation. I've had my cholesterol go up pretty high and I eat a stellar diet. So it wasn't what was happening physically, but rather what was going on in the mental, emotional, and even spiritual planes that was driving my cholesterol up. But then there's a secondary story about how the cholesterol is packaged. So you can have a higher than normal cholesterol number, but if you package it brilliantly, then it's only helping the body. We have to have cholesterol in order for our brains to think. So when did the first statins come on the market? 1970s or 80s? When did we see a sharp incline in cognitive decline? Shortly thereafter. Well, that's interesting. Yeah. Because the brain has to have cholesterol. Cholesterol is the backbone for all of our sex hormones. What are fertility statistics looking like? There's been a drop in American fertility over the last 40, 50 years. That have anything to do with people taking statins? What about erectile dysfunction? Well, that's just part of the cardiovascular triad. High blood pressure, high cholesterol, then type 2 diabetes. Stick a pin in that because we're going to come back to that because of the statins. And then if you're a man, there's going to be erectile dysfunction. Oh, but you're in your 40s. You don't need to be having sex. The manufacturer of atorvastatin, which is Lipitor, is under a huge class action suit for pushing people, particularly women, into type 2 diabetes. And this is what I witnessed as a pharmacist, people coming in with their blood pressure medicine and then ramping that up over time. And then they'd come back with 2 prescriptions with the highest dose of one and a secondary for their blood pressure. And then they come in with a statin for their high cholesterol. And if I stayed there long enough, I'd watch them turn into type 2 diabetics. It was something that I could predict.
Oh my.
This happens all the time, and it is probably the #1 cause of death in all of North America. It's called iatrogenesis. Iatrogenesis, which simply means harm by medicine. This is not negligence. It's not taking out the wrong lung or amputating the wrong leg. It's the right drug given for the right reason to the right person, filled correctly by the pharmacist and taken correctly by the patient, that still has a negative outcome, like enough people to take out a class action suit against the manufacturer of atorvastatin because it caused type 2 diabetes. And there are so many drugs that cause so many problems, either from its direct mechanism of action or because of those nutritional depletions that the drug causes that then look like some other medical condition for which they're given another pharmaceutical drug. And it goes on and on and on. And we are watching people stack up the drugs. But if it's truly better living through chemistry, why aren't we all shiny, happy people right now? We have the worst health stats than we've ever had.
So if a person is on statins and they would like to get off,
Yep.
what would you say is are the basic steps?
Yes. The basic steps are eat real food, drink clean water, move your body in a fun way most days of the week, outside preferably. Get radically good restorative sleep. And take an inventory, because people with high cholesterol very often are irritable, irritated, frustrated people. And in other forms of medicine around the globe, other forms of medicine haven't separated the physical from the things that we cannot sense. Other forms of medicine around the globe recognize that we're more than the sum of our physical parts. And so if you're frustrated with your job, you're going to have more inflammation. If you're frustrated in a relationship, if you're frustrated with the amount of traffic on the road, if you're frustrated and you cannot change what's causing the frustration, then change your perception around it. I was really frustrated in 2020, being a law-abiding citizen, locked down in my own home, being well, but forced to quarantine. Got very frustrated with that. I couldn't do much about it. It was a global kind of thing. So I had to work really hard on my perspective. Okay. When I look up, I am just absolutely overwhelmed with all the things that I can't control. Help me stay in my lane and do the things that I can do with the gifts and the talents that I've been given. Just show me the light at the path and the lamp at my feet, and I'm good. So sometimes it's a matter of changing perspective, and sometimes it's a matter of changing location, changing jobs, changing the dynamics of a given familial relationship. Maybe it's time for marriage counseling. Maybe it's time for parent-child counseling. Maybe it's time for some intervention from not just your own brain bank. But the first thing is change your lifestyle, and that changes your, quote, need, as if there was ever a need for a statin in your life. And when you change your lifestyle, we still going to ask that you get your labs done. It's not like we're throwing out the baby with the bathwater with conventional medicine. I want to see what your cholesterol numbers are, because when you change your lifestyle and you're medicated, your cholesterol is going to start going down to like, whoa, honey, can you still think? Your cholesterol is way too low. You were clearly over medicated. And I'm in an unlicensed state for naturopathic doctors. So I script for my clients, take this back to your medical doctor, to your prescriber, and say, look, you have a copy of my labs. My cholesterol is at 160. It's too low. And I've made some lifestyle changes because I didn't know this, doctor. You didn't tell me, but I'm working with someone else who's also a pharmacist. And these drugs are only ever to be used in conjunction with lifestyle changes. So I've been making the lifestyle changes, and I think I am now over medicated. So please decrease my statin. Some can be taken off, just boom, you're taking it one day and you're not taking it the next. But when you go to the medical doctor and say, I want you to continue to monitor my cholesterol, I'm too low with my cholesterol now, so I'd like a reduction in my statin. Let's check it again in 6 or 8 weeks. And then you have another reduction and another reduction until you're not on the medicine anymore. It's not rocket science, deprescribing. That's the easy part. The hard stuff is the lifestyle change that the people need to make for their own selves and for the sakes of their families. That's the hard stuff. But I tell folks, I'm going to be your educator. I'm going to be your accountability partner. I'm going to be your cheerleader. I'm going to provide informed consent for the drugs that you're already taking so that you've got that knowledge base to make the changes that are necessary to then show over medication, and then we take the drug off.
Nice.
So much fun.
So we here at AzureWell realize that this journey is something that people shouldn't take on their own. After all, if you're being prescribed a medication, that's not natural. And so in order to get off of it, sometimes it kind of takes something that feels unnatural, and you have to go back to a doctor that knows what they're doing in order to get you off, because yes, you're under a doctor's care, and to get off of that sometimes requires a doctor's care. So we have started on our AzureLivingWell.com website. We've started a Find a Practitioner page.
Yes.
And we already have several doctors from the Naturopathic Medical Institute, VNMI, so that the doctors that think like you do are signing up to be on our list.
Yes.
Because when you talk about vitalistic naturopath, you're looking at creating someone who is abundantly healthy from the inside, not just, hey, take this and you're going to feel better, but this is what you need to do on the inside.
Right. Thank you so much for getting that list going. Because like I said, people are starting to reconsider what their choices are in medicine. And people are actively looking for something that does not look or sound at all like conventional medicine. So I am proud to be the president of the Naturopathic Medicine Institute. I've been terrified for the first number of months, but I'm starting to get into that, wearing that mantle and feeling pretty okay with it. Because we are the doctors that see medical miracles. And I love medical miracles. I mean, it's easy to reverse type 2 diabetes. That's easy. When you see multiple sclerosis reverse over and over again, and other autoimmune conditions, I mean, just how fabulous is that? And to be able to be part of someone else's journey when they're going from this long list of medications that makes them feel just so sick and tired. And then they just blossom. It's like, this abundant sway, this abundant life, the fullness of life. And I think that's what we were meant for. So,
and this is giving people hope.
Yes.
It is giving them an ambition that it is possible to get well.
Absolutely it is. And the people who are able to put themselves in their top 4 priorities are the people that get well the fastest.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll tell people, however many years you've been suffering, consider working with me for that number of months.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if it's been your whole life, if you've been suffering because of complex childhood trauma that started probably at birth or prior to birth,
Mm-hmm.
then, and you've been on this planet for 48 years, consider working with me for 48 months. Yes, that's 4 years of your time.
Mm-hmm.
But if you are serious about reversing all of that, that has impacted you, not just physically, but emotionally and mentally and spiritually,
Mm-hmm.
then just know it's going to take about 4 years
Mm-hmm.
to get you off of this disease trajectory and firmly into health.
Mm-hmm.
And I've done this long enough that my clients are now going, okay, all right, yeah. So this still hasn't reversed and this still hasn't reversed, but you're right. This and this and that and the other thing all have reversed and the whole family is healthier. And
Mm-hmm.
we're in year 3 out of our 4 years.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's one gal, we have been working, I told her that 4 years. And in her 3rd year, she's like, Fleetwood, you said we'd be working together for 4 years and we're in our 3rd year. And I don't know how I would do life without you. And I'm like, girl, I will. She's like, you got to teach me how to live without you. Okay. You're not going to need me. My job is to work myself out of a job. So just relax.
Mm-hmm.
By the end of this year, you're not going to need the same level of hand holding because you'll be in your final lap.
Mm-hmm.
So, you'll drop down to a very easy kind of plan with me. And
Mm-hmm.
that's where she is. And she's just delighted that I don't need you anymore, except for when I need you.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the way it should be.
It
That the
is the
body
way
should
it
be able to
is.
handle itself and do well.
We are created for health. We have such a brilliant design
Mm-hmm.
that,
Absolutely.
I mean, it is stunning to study human anatomy and physiology and biochemistry.
Mm-hmm.
Really, the basic sciences in medicine prove the work that I do.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I love it.
And the body wants to get well. It was
Wants to.
made to get well. You give
Mhm.
it what it needs. You bring it back into balance with nutrition and, even balancing out your emotions, things like that, and you'll be better.
You
So
sure will.
this was good. Thank you, Christy.
You're welcome.
We'll have to have you back on because, hey, a lot of people want to know how to get rid of their type 2 diabetes. And you said it was easy. So
It
we may need to
is.
get you back on for that. And then also we're hoping to have other doctors from the NMI to get
Yes.
on and talk about the little pieces along the way that they're an expert in to
Mhm.
help people with their particular issues. So I'm hoping we helped people feel empowered today, at least
Me too.
about the esophageal, GERD, all those, as well as, the statins. And so thank you, Dr. Fleetwood.
Absolutely. Thank
This has
you.
been great. I think this is
A lot of
wonderful.
fun.
Yeah.